Section 5 of the Penny Magazine of the Society for the Diffusion of Useful Knowledge, Issue 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Penny Magazine of the Society for the Diffusion of Useful Knowledge, Issue 2, by Charles Knight. The Week. April 7. The day of the birth, and also that of the death, of Raffaello Sanzio da Urbino, whom the universal voice of posterity has recognized as the Prince of modern painters, and designated by the enthusiastic appellation of the Divine Raphael. No rival, at least, has ever been placed beside Raphael, except Michelangelo. Of the two illustrious contemporaries, the former may perhaps be appropriately styled the Shakespeare, the latter the Milton of painting. Dignity and imposing grandeur of design are the reigning characteristics of Michelangelo. The highest dramatic power which has ever been displayed by the pencil, and the representation of passion with all the force of life, are the qualities that chiefly give their wonderful fascination to the works of Raphael. Raphael was born at Urbino in 1843. By the time he had reached the age of 25, he had so greatly distinguished himself that he was invited by Pope Julius II to paint in fresco the chambers of the Vatican. From this time till his death in 1520, at the early age of 37, he was employed in the execution of a succession of great works, chiefly for that pontiff and his successor, Leo X. His most famous performances are his picture of the School of Athens in the Vatican, the Transfiguration, and his cartoons on subjects taken from the Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles, which were brought into this country by Charles I, and are now to be seen at Hampton Court, upon the payment of a shilling for each party. Like Michelangelo, Raphael was an architect as well as a painter, and among other buildings superintended the erection of part of the cathedral in St. Peter's. But his untimely death interrupted his prosecution of this and other great works on which he was engaged, leaving him, however, though with glory, gathered in comparative youth, with no living superior, and followed by no equal in succeeding times. April 10. This is the birthday of the celebrated Dutch writer Hugh de Groot, better known by his Latin name of Grotius, who was born at Delft in 1583. Grotius was a prodigy of youthful talent and acquirement. When only 14, he prepared an edition of a Latin author, Martianus Capella, in which he showed extensive classical and historical erudition. At the age of 16, having already made a journey to France and been presented to Henry IV, who honored him with the gift of his picture and a gold chain, he entered upon the profession of an advocate of Delft. From this time he continued till his death to take an active part in political transactions, but still found leisure to write a vast number of books, most of them distinguished for their learning and ability. The book by which he is now principally known is his famous treatise on the law of nations, entitled On the Right of Peace and War. It was first published at Paris in 1625. Another of his productions, which is still very popular, is his treatise On the Truth of the Christian Religion, written, like the former, in Latin, but which has been translated into every language of Europe. Grotius wrote a great part of this work while confined by a rival political faction in the castle of Loevestein, from which, however, after nearly 2 years' detention, his wife contrived to get him conveyed away in a chest, which she pretended was full of books. Grotius died in his 63rd year on the 28th of August, 1645. April 11. The birthday of the late Right Honourable George Canning, who was born in London in the year 1771. His father, an Irish gentleman of good family, died the same year in which his son was born. At the usual age, young Canning was sent to Eton, where he soon distinguished himself by the brilliancy of his talents. While there, he made the first public trial of his literary powers in The Microcosm, a very clever periodical work, which he carried on in conjunction with some of his schoolfellows, and of which he was the projector and the editor. In 1787 he removed to Christ Church, Oxford, intending to adopt the profession of the law. But while yet at the university, his reputation for ability obtained for him the notice of Mr. Pitt, who brought him into Parliament in 1793. Mr. Canning's official career belongs to the history of his country, and especially that period of it during which he was the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs. The system of foreign policy with which his name is associated has caused his memory to be held in honor, and although he opposed parliamentary reform, as well as other popular measures, yet his steadfast support of Catholic emancipation for a long series of years, and the protection he afforded to the cause of freedom on the Continent and in South America, are proofs of his attachment to a celebrated toast of the civil and religious liberty all over the world. In April 1827 he was appointed Prime Minister by George IV, and continued to hold the offices of First Lord of the Treasury and Chancellor of the Exchequer until his death on the 8th of August of the same year, at the Duke of Devonshire's villa at Chiswick, after a short illness. His death at so early a period after his accession to power called forth a deep feeling of grief in his own country, and perhaps a still stronger and more general feeling on the Continent, where medals were struck in memory of the Prime Minister. End of section 5. Read by David Lawrence in Ottawa, Ontario, September 2025.